Good afternoon, everyone. I am Lori Baskin. I'm Director of Advocacy at Theater Communications Group. My pronouns are she, her, hers. For those of you who are listening, I'm a white woman with dark shoulder-length hair, and I'm wearing a black top, and I'm sitting in my family room. I'm joining you from northern Westchester on the ancestral lands of the Lenape and Wappinger peoples. Thank you for joining us for this special presentation, which we've arranged in partnership with the National Endowment for the Arts and TYA USA, celebrating the importance of theater for young audiences. We will shortly enjoy a roundtable of playwrights and parents as Idris Goodwin, Lauren Gunderson, and Alvaro Saar Rios speak about their experiences writing for young audiences, what the work means for them in light of the pandemic and newly energized movements for racial justice, and the great responsibility that comes with writing plays for the next generation of citizens and theater-goers. But first, I want to note that this week is the National Arts in Education Week, which runs from September 13th through 19th. This year marks the 10th anniversary of Congress passing House Resolution 275, which designates the week beginning with the second Sunday in September as National Arts in Education Week. Federal advocates have crafted a unified statement which includes this about arts education. We support a complete education for all students through federal education funding and distance learning resources that will increase the capacity of state and local education agencies to ensure equitable access to arts education as part of a well-rounded education for all learners, particularly amidst the COVID-19 crisis and beyond. As we celebrate National Arts in Education Week, we recognize that arts education is under serious pressure right now. Even though it can help students learn better, adapt to isolation, cope with fear and loss, and stay inspired to graduate, strained budgets and the challenges of socially distanced, safe learning threaten to deprive our students of access to a well-rounded education that includes the arts in this school year. We are hearing about dramatic cuts to arts education in school districts coast to coast, and they will grow exponentially if we do not take decisive action. Students are finding joy in new forms of creative expression. Advocates are taking a stand to ensure this critical part of a well-rounded education doesn't get lost in tough circumstances. Please contact your elected officials to protect funding and time for arts education. With that, I would now like to turn the session over to the chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts and our wonderful panelists, and I'll see you after the panel.
This spring, the National Endowment for the Arts, in partnership with Theater Communications Group and Theater for Young Audiences USA, published a report entitled Envisioning the Future of Theater for Young Audiences. Beginning with a session at the 2019 TCG conference in Miami, this report details the challenges and opportunities faced by theaters in America focused on programming for young audiences, and also includes research in the powerful effects of exposure to theater for children and teens. Back then, of course, none of us could have imagined the immediate future and the profound change in store for theaters this year. It goes without saying this is an incredibly challenging time, especially for the performing arts. But I've been heartened to see how the theater community has rallied together and continues to inspire, enchant, and support Americans in endless creative ways. The panel you're about to view was originally planned to be part of the TCG conference in Phoenix. And while I wish I could have been there with you in person, I'm grateful to TCG for rescheduling a virtual session with the phenomenal playwrights Idris Goodwin, Lauren Gunderson, and Alvaro Saar Rios, who are literally writing the future of theater for young audiences. I'm pleased to now turn things over to Idris, who will be moderating a discussion with Lauren and Alvaro about playwriting during a pandemic and writing specifically for young audiences and their families. If you would like to learn more about the Arts Endowment's work to make the arts accessible to all Americans, or read the Theater for Young Audiences report, please visit our website at arts.gov. And now, on with the show.
Lauren, Alvaro, how we doing?
Good. Good to see you.
Great. Hi.
Good to see you both, yeah.
I'm very excited that the three of us are going to get to have this conversation. You know, this is a great, I believe this is a great time to be a playwright. COVID aside, I feel like the last 20 years, this sort of renewed interest in new work and supporting new playwrights, and you know, just feels to me really exciting and like, you know, really monumental. And I think this era is going to be a time they look back on. I mean, do you all share that sentiment, or do you feel like the game is still a big wreck?
I mean, I think as soon as the pandemic hit, the first people that theaters called were writers. What can you write? What can you create? What can you make? And that reveals the headwaters of stories, you know, that's us. So in that way, it was a confirmation of feeling like, wow, we have a lot of power. And with that power, we have, of course, responsibility, but we also have the beginning of change making, the beginning of dreaming a new dream of what this theater can look like. And certainly with the second pandemic of racism, that is certainly not new, but it coincided with all of this, that once again turned to the writers and the storytellers to say, how do we talk about this now? How do we change now? What's the next? What's the new? What's the better? So I'm certainly feeling both of those ways empowered, not just as a writer, but as an appreciator of other writers to say, thank God that you're telling stories right now.
Yeah, that's what's up. Alvaro, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, I mean, everything that Lauren said, I mean, I was really, I mean, yeah, there was a part of me was like, okay, well, what's next? But then, I mean, for me, it has always been, it's kind of like when those slumps where the work isn't coming, it's just like, you just keep creating. And this definitely was a time where felt like, I mean, there was a point where I felt like I needed a time to just kind of just be in the moment and actually not create. But then finally, when, you know, in terms of knowing that my family was okay and you know, from Texas, but also here, then I was like, okay, I finally felt comfortable to just start being able to get into it. And then, you know, I was being reached out by theaters in terms of, okay, well, yeah, well, what can you create? And I mean, all the content is always going to be needed. And just as Lauren said, this totally reaffirms it. I mean, we are the storytellers, and we can be able to do it. And the great thing is about being a writer is we can do it anywhere, and definitely locked in our own house, you know? So.
Yeah, I mean, you two in particular, to me, are the writers that I feel like really pivoted and sprang into action very quickly. You know, I know there's some writers that are like, nah, I'm cool, I'll wait. You know what I mean?
Are you crazy? It's a pandemic. What are you writing?
Yeah, I'm not judging them at all.
No, of course not.
But I feel like you guys jumped right into it in some really cool ways, almost like with a bit of a sort of a like, okay, you know, talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, about that nature, and what is it in you that made you feel like you could keep going? Or, I mean, how did you, you know, what motivated you or made you think like, I can still even find my niche in this moment? I mean, Alvaro, you kind of spoke to it a little bit just a second ago, but expand on that a bit.
Well, I mean, I would just say, like, I mean, it's, for me, it's, I think this is the only thing I know how to do. And writing has always been therapy for me. And I mean, what better therapy than just being able to write about specific, number one, while trying to, work on plays, I've been working on essays and poems, and just kind of been using this time to to really just kind of delve into, take time to really delve into things that I've kind of wanted to delve into. And I feel like this has always been an aspect of me. Like whenever I've had time to write, I mean, I do it. I mean, I think back to when I was just first getting into writing, even before knowing I was going to be a playwright, when I was in the Army. We used to drive tanks. I used to drive a tank, and whenever we'd stop and have a break, and all the guys would be over there, hanging out playing dominoes or whatever. Here I am, just sitting in my little thing, just writing. And I mean, I always felt that's where I felt most comfortable, and I felt
you're such a badass.
I was like,
that's a rad
tank driving thing. I'd rather write a play.
Tank driving playwrights? Are you kidding me? Wow.
But yeah,
there's a fundraiser. Every artistic director in the country is like,
they just went,
a fundraiser, can we?
But I mean, that's been my nature in terms of, this is all I can do. And this is what I know I can do. And when I felt comfortable at the time, I was like, okay, let's start creating.
I mean, it's interesting. I think the first couple weeks was a bit of that, kind of my breath was taken away, but I could talk about what I love. I could talk about theater. And that's kind of what these classes online came from, is going like, I do not know if I'm ever going to write another sentence, but I know that I can talk about dramatic structure. I can talk about character building. I can talk about what I love about theater and what I'm learning about theater in this moment, and the loss of it and the reimagining of it, etc. But that kept me focused on it. And I just randomly was like, I'll do one. Okay, I'll do one once a week. Okay, I'll just do a lot of them. And then it kind of kept snowballing. But being in conversation with people that, one, I would have never been in conversation with. So many people across the country and the world, really, getting, requests and, all sorts of those things. So it helped me focus on it in a different way. And then switching into my own personal productivity and creativity, I got, I'm sure like a lot of you did, be like, can you write us like a small something to put online? And I was at first like, no. And then I was like, I mean, maybe. And then I'm so smitten by the short form suddenly. I'd given up on it. I never really did it. I didn't really write that many short plays. And then suddenly I'm finding the beauty and the brevity of it and how bold. And I mean, Idris, your piece was so transformative to me and my kids, the one that you wrote about your house. And so anyway, I discovered new things about me and new ways to write, and then a couple of things happened at the same time. One, writing a piece specifically for a theater. My husband is an expert in pandemics, randomly during a pandemic. So I never, ever thought I would ever write about him, but the combination of events and the pause and the new way of thinking about things and the challenge means that I'm dreaming up, I've written the first draft and, making sure it's decent, to imagine another one, a one-person thing that is designed. It could be, of course, done in a theater, like all plays could be done in a theater, but this one is designed to capture a listening experience and a viewing experience from home, which again, never thought I'd do that. But then the other thing was going, well, what do we have and what can we use it for differently now? So a musical I'm working on called Jeanette, about the first female congressperson in American history, also about the 19th Amendment, because she was the only woman that was elected in the time to vote on women getting the right to vote. So we were planning to do the big thing in the next year or so. And then everything shut down, of course. And so my collaborator, Alvaro Saar, and I just said, well, we have this music and this musical and this story about a woman changing the world by being elected, and the power of voting and the intersectional and bigoted reality of voting rights in America, and how the 19th Amendment gave white women the right to vote, not everybody, et cetera, et cetera. So, well, here we are in 2020, 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, and the calls for reckoning about a sense of what racism is in America, and certainly the 19th Amendment had that as a feature of it. What do we do with it? Well, we pivot, we put it online. So my colleague and I have created a small version, like a 20-minute version. It's a storytelling, she sings, I'm doing monologues from the show. And so it's been amazing, and we're offering it to progressive candidates across the country. And we did Cori Bush, we're doing Tammy Duckworth and Doug Jones in Alabama, and like all these people, and not just senators, but people of every running for state houses and mayors. And so anyway, it's just kind of going, well, the arts became this form of activism for me, even just a class online, even just talking to somebody that you never would have talked to, visiting a class that you never would have been able to go, but they asked you, and it's like, well, I'm at home, you're at home, let's go online and have a conversation with kids. That, or, endorsing and fundraising for Cori Bush. The arts are a part of this, and a part of this moment, and a part of making me think, well, what can we do now that we just wouldn't have done, instead of going, what can't we do? What can't we do? Well, what can we do? So anyway, I'm also a just absolutely irreparable optimist. So I hit this moment and was like, you know what? We're gonna be positive as long as we damn can.
Well, those classes, what I love those. I mean, I even watched your classes that you were putting. I mean, I've said, I mean, you just reminded me, like, that was also very helpful to me, and I'm sure for other playwrights as well, on all different levels, just to be able to like hear and listen in about people talking about the craft and various aspects. And I mean, I teamed up to teach for the Latinx Super Friends Playwriting Hour. Oh, I love for HowlRound. Like, we were talking about, I was like, hey, let's get all the Latinx people, and let's just kind of like share. I mean, this is the time. People are at home. Let's create. And so, I mean, and I feel like that definitely. I mean, I totally forgot to mention that earlier, but that definitely also helped me feel like I could get somewhere, because I was at least connecting with other people and talking about the craft and storytelling and what I love about this, which I didn't love in the beginning. I mean, I don't know who would have loved the whole Zoom thing, but is that we can be able to reach communities that aren't usually can be able to kind of have access to this stuff. And I think this is also one of the reasons why I got into theater, was because I wanted to be able to create theater that could be accessible in ways that didn't have to be stuck within within the building. Like, I just wanted to just create, and if I could do it in a community center or a bar, or it was, for me, it was just, I could still be able to create, and I wanted to create it as minimally, just so I could be able to have access to as many people as I could. And I felt like this is also kind of, I think this is, I don't know, this is kind of what I've also loved about this whole Zoom thing now, is just that we can be able to reach communities, and I can be able to teach a class. And I mean, just as you said, I mean, I'm going to be talking to some universities that there's no way I probably, in my schedule, be able to fly over there, but now everybody's Zooming, like, let's talk.
Sure.
And hopefully I can be able to connect with some other students,
Yeah, so on this tip about communities and access, I mean, I think that is definitely another shared value. And I wonder, to me, I'm looking for like the link, right? Because a lot of times when we talk about, I mean, I got to go here, but I'm trying to go here in a different way, which is that, we all write for younger audiences, or I would like to say that we consider younger audiences. I don't necessarily think that any of us necessarily say this, the 3-year-olds are going to love this. I think we all realize that adults go with them, and that we have to love it too, or else it's, Drek is Drek. So, but for me, I wonder, even across the landscape of all your work, but also the subject matter of your work, talk a little bit about, that value and how it plays into your craft, like the writing itself and the choices you make. How much do you consider audience? How much do you consider subject matter? When you're going through your process as writers.
I want to know your answer to all these questions too.
Yeah. Listen, I'm the medium for the audience right now. It's not about me and my process. It's about getting to know you two. Haven't I said enough? Let's be honest.
Never enough. Never.
Right, cool. Part 2. We'll switch it up. We'll do this 3 times. We'll all take turns to be a moderator.
Well, you know, I mean, I have a couple of different answers for that because it depends on the play. Like, and the category for me is this a specific TYA or family play? You know, the ones that are under an hour, perhaps there's music. And I've done a few of these for the Kennedy Center and Theater Works and touring based on kids' books. And, you know, that is definitely about like, what does a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, what can they buy into, have fun? I think about, you know, structural things that like, okay, we need to put a song or something here or some engagement right here because we're going to lose them and they're going to start, you know, being jerks with their friends or being loud or, you know, thinking in kind of like mom terms for a second. And then, you know, making sure that the funny is funny and the feelings are feelings. And so much of my work is about lifting up women and girls and also telling young men they can feel too. And, you know, that vulnerability is a powerful thing and, you know, all of those like good for the world stuff. But I think it's a tiny bit different when I'm writing for this, adaptation and reimagining of Peter Pan than I did for Shakespeare Theatre Company last year, which was a main stage show. It's like a 2-hour main stage, big budget show. And so that was certainly for families considering them, but we also knew that there's going to be a lot of like, you know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg came because she comes and sees everything there, which was like, you know, come on.
I mean,
it's like the greatest of all things, but you know.
I mean, yo, are you like, like that's kind of,
I'm done.
You kind of like, I'm good. Did you just like drop your pen and paper at that point and just say,
I'm good. She clapped.
Like, what's the
name?
I'm done. You had your Titanic moment. You're like, I'm king of the world.
Exactly. But you know what I mean? So I just use that example one because it's rad.
No, I had to. No, we gotta stay on this.
It was a very girl-powered Peter Pan. I wasn't there that night because she came mid-run. Oh yeah, can you imagine? Okay. But you know, it's a show that it's right up her alley because it's very, you know, girl and women centered, and it's about decolonization, and it's about, you know, changing all the kind of narrative also around boys and making Peter Pan not just be celebrated because he can't feel, he can't touch anyone, and he fights everybody. Going like, or you could maybe like work together and listen and share your feelings, and maybe that's how you win instead of just brute force. And anyway, but the point is like thinking about that in a different way and going, is this, who's going to actually be coming? And in that case, there's a broad swath of people that were going to be coming. And so it's a chance to take something that they may go, oh, Peter Pan, it's nostalgic, it's easy, I know what this is, and very purposely going with the politics or switching the perspective. I mean, one of the biggest changes was Tiger Lily having all the agency in the world and calling him out and saying like, you think there's no stories in Neverland because you never asked my people our stories. We had stories before you even got here. So fix yourself, Peter Pan, you know? And so it was this kind of sense of going, wow, the families that were like, oh, what a good, you know, I can't wait for this easy breezy Peter Pan are suddenly talking about feminism and colonization and racism and, you know, empowered women and all of this stuff. So again, that's again, kind of a different way of going. Theater can be like a big punch in the gut, or it can be a like, come on, kids, let's learn together and respect each other. You know, it's.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about that point, real quick? It's interesting as you're talking about it. I'm like, you know, especially because I'm obsessed with adaptation, right? And it's like all that stuff's in the source material. You just chose to let's actually talk about that. Let's just not assume that that's normal. So it's not betraying the story. You're not manipulating the story in some ill way. You're saying this is in here.
Yeah. Let's clear away some of the stuff to see it.
But a modern audience is going to look at this and see it too. So instead of pretending like it's not there or it's normal, you know it's abnormal because someone's going to notice it and identify it as abnormal. So I think that's really interesting. Those are some very powerful, strong choices.
And
that
kids' stories can do that.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, like those older stories that we just accept as like, oh, this is how it is. Those are the ones that you can feel that fresh breeze if you even change a few things, and people can really think about things in a different way. And that's such a great metaphor for thinking about other things you've accepted in the world or in your life, that you can go, oh my God, if I just asked who's missing from the story or switched who was telling it, suddenly, oh my God, I had no idea what I was being given or what I accepted because of that. So anyway, everything's a metaphor.
Alvaro, as Lauren's talking about Peter Pan and adaptation, I can't help but bring up, my favorite play. One of my favorite plays, period, is your play, Luchadora, which similarly is an adaptation, but really and has a very prominent female identified protagonist. Talk a little bit about your genesis with that play and the choices that you made, and circling around this sort of theme of accessibility and all that good stuff.
Sure. So I've always been drawn to the story of the folktale of Mulan, and I wrote a short adaptation for a theater, and after they did it, I was shopping it around, and then I realized nobody wanted to produce it, and as I was thinking about it, there was a point where I was really starting to think, I was like, am I the right person to be telling this story? And so, but I still really loved that whole narrative. And so there was a point where I was like, how is there a way that I can be able to adapt it and really, because I feel like when you adapt something, definitely you should have a reason. Other than getting paid for it. But and I felt like, where's my connection to this? And for me, my connection was, this was a story about a strong woman. And I've grown up around strong women from my grandmother, my mother, my wife, my sisters. I'm surrounded by them. And so I've always been drawn to those kind of stories. And so I felt like I wanted to write a piece that really celebrated the strong women in my life. And it was a piece that, number one, I'll acknowledge my love for wrestling in terms of, because wrestling is theater, right? But then also I wanted to write a piece for my son, because I think what I've started to see in some shows specifically directed for young audiences, where when there is a female protagonist, it always seems like, well, there's only the girls are only taken to the show, where it's just like, oh, well, this is a show for girls. And I really wanted this, still having this lead protagonist as a female, that I wanted this show to be for my son. I think it's very important for boys to see strong women, stories about strong girls, and especially stories about strong girls of color, which we I think definitely TYAs definitely should, where I think it is definitely, there's still a need, growing need for that, and because this is something that still continues to be important to me. I feel like either you complain about it or you write about it. And I wanted my son to see it. And so, especially with Luchadora, my son, the fact that one of the roles that I wrote for my wife, the mask maker, my son just, that's who I wrote it for. But also, I also knew that because I was, it's the same thing as you say, the adults are going to come to the show. I wanted them to be able to connect to it too. So, I really started to put in this story talking about, the migrant, being a migrant worker in terms of one of the characters. Also connecting to my own father's story of being a migrant worker. So, I really kind of poured as much as I could in there, because I really wanted to celebrate, number one, celebrate strong women, but even celebrate the Latino culture in a way that that hadn't been, that I hadn't seen. And even taking us on this kind of journey from Milwaukee to Texas, because how often, and when you think about it in terms of stories being told about Latinos, like this one, even though it's set in Milwaukee, we go to Texas, but it ends back up where we go back to Milwaukee again, and how often do we see a story about Latinos in Milwaukee? So it's
never. You're
exactly right.
Yeah, pioneer, bro.
And so so for me, that's what I continue to think about. I write, as much as my protagonists definitely tend to be younger, I write for audiences, and what I tell people is like, Latino theater is actually, it's family theater. Like we want to be able to take our kids to something, and then we want to get something out of it. And I mean, because I think about it in terms of like, growing up more just as the movie aspect. Like there were times where like there were certain things that we all enjoyed as a family, and I think that's what I feel like. I would love to see more shows that I can always feel like I can bring my son.
I know.
And it isn't just catered towards him, and it just isn't catered towards me. Like, I write what I want to see, basically. And it does fit in the TYA aspect. But, ultimately, I want to believe luchadora can be done anywhere. And that I saw it in St. Louis. There was no kids in the audience because the theater that produced it didn't usually do like TYA. There was no kids in the audience other than my son. But everybody enjoyed it, and so I think, it's starting to, that's just what I want to write. I write what I want to see, and hopefully in changing that,
Yeah. And a good play is a good play, right? And so every time I talk about TYA, and I think you and I have talked about this several times, Idris, that you're writing great theater. It's just theater with, as you say, is absorbent of and considering younger audiences. And the truth is I do the same sort of machinations in my head when I'm writing adult plays about like, when are they going to want to, shake and move and talk to their buddy. Adults do that too.
Yeah.
When do they need to go to the bathroom? And the idea of really respecting a young audience, because these kids are so smart. And I didn't even know how smart young kids were until I had my own, and just the way that they think and the way they consider and how sensitive they are to emotions, and different kids have different levels of sensitivity. So trying to find something that's just a damn good story. Yeah. Of course you're going to have young people and their adults both feeling something.
All right, good. This is great. So you guys got me thinking. I'm going to try to, I'm wondering if I should break this up into two questions. I'm going to break this up into two questions. So what when you were kids, right? So, and I'm gonna say like not teenagers, like when you were a child, what did you love? Particularly, whether it was theater, whatever it was, like what woke you up? What made you say, oh my gosh, what a world we live in? What boundless possibility there is. Like, what were your jams when you were youngsters, younger than now? Y'all still young, okay? Younger than present.
Oh man.
Oof.
For me, I automatically, like, the one example that's really vivid for me is so my mom. I grew up in Houston, Texas, and they used to always have wrestling on Friday nights in Houston, and I went with some of my friends, and my mom dropped us off. Like, it wasn't like, and I don't think the oldest who was part of the group was more than 10, right? But going to see a live wrestling show, and I think this comes into my whole deep aspects of storytelling and theater. That became my obsession in terms of wow, that opened the world to me. Just something like that. But it was also because growing up where I didn't get to go out that often in terms of, much less go out, with my friends. So, I would say that has been always an obsession to me in terms of wrestling. And I feel like that's really why I've gotten into theater, is that whole, it totally opened up the world to me in terms of storytelling and learning about so many different things and live and just seeing something live, I don't know if that was anywhere near what you were looking for, man. But
that's exactly
that was my jam, man.
Exactly. No,
I lived for that.
And who was the, for you, what is like the, for wrestling fans, I've heard this before, that, when they say what is the sort of Hamlet of professional wrestling, everyone says WrestleMania 3, right? Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Pontiac Silverdome, that is that's wrestling, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
For you, would you agree? What were the moments that really, what was the, who was your, person?
Who was my person? My person was my junkyard dog, man. And the reason why, what I loved about him was he also, when he got kicked out, he did a wrestling match where if you lose, you got to leave town. He came back, he put on a mask, and he was Stagger Lee. And
yes, that's right.
He sounded like him. I mean, you can see the beard coming out and everything. He had, and I don't know, that's what I love.
That's Greek. Put on a mask and like,
yeah, it's like, I'm a different
next scene.
Stagger Lee, you know?
Yeah.
And that's, I love that. And anytime, like, I would always, I don't care where he was, if I saw him last week wrestling, I wanted to see him the next week and the next week. And it was just something theatrical about it. I mean, I think, and that, you know, thinking about it, it's like the whole mass aspect was very appealing.
Right.
See, unpacking. What about you, LG?
I mean, you're making me think, because I didn't have like an obvious one. I saw a play and it changed. I thought I can do that. I don't actually have any of those. I mean,
what was your jam? Like, what were you into? You know?
Well, and it's making me thinking what y'all are saying. I was actually such a tomboy. I loved baseball. I love baseball so much. And the Braves, when I was in 5th grade, I think, 5th grade was when the Braves went worst to first. So it was like massive. And it was unlike anything I'd felt because it was citywide. Like we'd had this terrible team and the Hawks really, fine. They were a basketball team. I never watched football. So I was like, I don't know. But something about baseball, the presentation of it, you sing halfway through, the food, the like all the cheers and the rants, and of course these were the Braves, so they were, now I definitely see the racism in their chants and their symbols. Hopefully that will change very soon. But that sense of like going to this group live event, that the stakes are very clear, right? We know who's the good guys, who's the bad guys. We know what we want our good guys to do. We want them to win, and like the great games feel like great theater. It's down to the wire. What's going to happen? Someone's got to put it all on the line, you know. And so I think the being swept away by sport. And I also remember asking my dad, like, why can't girls play baseball? So like, there's my little baby feminism creeping in and being like, objection, but still the sense of the heroism of it, and it just felt active. And anyway, so there's something about that, the bigness of sport, and great sport is like great theater in a lot of ways, and ways that I'm still puzzling. I wrote a very silly sports play that was a kind of a spin on Macbeth. It's called Toil and Trouble. And I wrote it when I moved to San Francisco, so it's actually about the Giants, but you can put it into whatever sports team you have. So anyway, but yes, it's about like the baseball, and the rise of like the championship is kind of, they're like, oh gosh, who's going to get the crown? It's so silly, but I love it very much. So yeah, I think that might have been really evocative to me, those early moments. I mean, like you go with your dad, and I remember like I did all the reading for the 6 months of school, and I got a free ticket in the nosebleeds, like literally the last row, but whatever. I earned it, we're there, ice cream, cheering with my dad, you know. Anyway,
cool. I love baseball. I love baseball too.
That totally brings up something, which is also, which it was in Luchadores. I loved riding my bike, you know, in terms of riding bikes with friends. So I felt like and that's a reason why that's in there in Luchador, in terms of there's these bicycles and these young girls that were working on it and everything. I mean, that was our freedom in terms of our neighborhood. I mean, we got to explore our neighborhood and other neighborhoods and just on our bike, riding all around Houston. Probably at an age where we shouldn't have been riding all around Houston, but you know,
the 80s, yo.
Exactly, you know. And I mean that whole aspect. I mean, and I feel like thinking about that, like especially how much reverence. Like, I mean, if I could afford it, I would collect, and have the space, I'd collect bicycles because I'm so connected to them. I just love them, and And I think that's also how it's kind of fed into when I was writing Luchadora. I was like, my connection to it so much is like our freedom was, that was our way to be able to at least be able to kind of break the monotony of like, okay, let's go explore with these things. And I think I also get connected to shows that ever do that, where it's like, you know, I mean, there's something freeing about a bicycle to a kid. You know?
Yeah,
I don't know if it is today. I would hope so, but
it better be. Now, there's something you just helped reveal for me about this question, this unending question that TYA writers get all the time. It's like, what is it about kids? What is it about, you know? It's that they want adventure. They're ready. They are ready to adventure. Oh, cool! I'm gonna drop everything I'm doing. Like, let's go. They are so game for it all the time, and that's something that, as adults, some of them become like super adventure adults, and many of us are like, I don't know. It's gonna be hot. I don't know. So this is my second part of that first question I asked you. You know, what are things that you were excited or are excited, you know, in terms of story, to share with your kids? So, you know, Alvaro, you know, that was a beautiful thing you said about, you know, Luchadora being for your son. That's what's up. I mean, you know, but I wonder, like, things that affected you, that had an impact on you as a kid, that you maybe shared with them, or like, this is something sacred to me, or something that maybe, like, I have a play that I was a commission play, and the pitch I gave was, this is a play about me asking the question, at what age is it appropriate to play Wu-Tang for your children? Because that is what's sacred to me. Enter the 36 chambers.
Great question.
Yeah, what is the answer?
We decided 12.
Okay.
12. So, you know, so I remember showing my son The Princess Bride, and that was like a thrilling moment, because to me that story is nearly perfect. There's some gender stuff in there that hasn't aged well, but but you know, here's my one. Anyway, I won't go into it.
Just make Inigo a girl, and we're fine.
Maybe, yeah. Well, no, I just wanted the thing about Buttercup, the way that Buttercup acts in the swamp does not do favors.
Yeah, no, not so much.
And Andre the Giant's in there.
Andre the Giant, we got our wrestling
in there. I'm telling you.
You know what's really sad about that story too? When you know the behind the scenes stories, is that he was in so much pain. He's like playing this big strong giant, and he was like so weak. You know, like other people had to carry him, and you know, every time they yelled cut, he would just like have to lay down and stuff like that. So I'm obsessed with Princess Bride. Anyway, so I mean, a lot was on the line when I showed that. Was like if my kid didn't like that, that was
one of our pandemic family movies. Yeah, I showed it to them.
Best. It's nearly perfect. So for y'all, same questions. Like, what is something that you have shared with them that was really exciting, or something that you haven't shared yet, but you wait for the day to do so?
I mean, I have two answers. One would be a play that I need to write, which is more about a play that I could have used when I was a girl. And a lot of that is about body image, perfectionism for women, and how that often manifests in eating disorders, which I had when I was in middle school. And I know it started early in terms of thinking about, and what are the ways that we can burst those images open? And a play for young audiences about that was something that I definitely wanted to write for a while. And it, I mean, affects boys too. So trying to make sure it's all about toxic masculinity and delicate femininity and hyper perfectionism on both fronts. Boys will be boysness. They all kind of collide into this tornado. Right. So writing about that.
It's about behavior, mirroring behavior, taking cues. You know, I think that's
and then, but the ones that I took my boys to, actually, we had the last show I did at the Kennedy Center was about rockets, about space. And it was a commission for the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing. And my collaborators, Brian Loudermilk and Kate Kerrigan, and I wrote a musical about the kids of the astronaut mathematicians and engineers who got to the moon. But it's the kids on Earth looking up. And, you know, Neil Armstrong's son, was famously was supposed to be at a baseball championship game when his dad was launching, and he was kind of pissed that he wasn't at his game. And everyone's like, your dad's on a rocket right now. And you're like, boo-hoo, supposed to be pitching. Yeah, right? Well, but that's what and to me, that's what it's about. Like, kids care about what they care about, and what's important to them is what's so important. And it always feels like adults don't understand if you only understood. And so, you know, there's a story for a young Black girl who is kind of based on Dr. Mae Jemison, who's the first Black female astronaut in space. and this little girl going, well, I want to be an astronaut, but all the astronauts are white boys. What do I do? And then the other character is a young girl who's an artist in a family of engineers. And so she feels misunderstood, being like, I just draw these pictures and you critique them as though they're not scientific diagrams, but they're not, it's art. And of course, everyone learns and grows and uses the imagination to get to the moon and back, and it's really about understanding your parents and parents understanding their kids. And so anyway, that's one that I was able to share with my little guys. And it was so breathtaking and so meaningful to watch them watch it, and to watch them, you know, even the first time that, you know, Neil Armstrong says, son, hi, son, the boys just lit up because they were like, oh, I'm a son. Oh, you know, even just little things like that. And of course, all the women empowerment and connected to science, they were, you know, one of them was like, I want to be the girl. I'm going to be Sophia. And I was like, yeah, you do. Yeah, you want to be Sophia. So anyway, it's stuff like that where I feel like there is, because part of what I care about sharing with them is the magic of theater, is the magic of really good theater, because Brian and Kate's music and songs are so breathtaking. The production was so gorgeous, directed by Dominic Williams. Choreography, like, and it was just a moment to go, not only is this about something I know you care about, my boys love anything NASA, space, rockets, planets, but it's about something mom cares about, telling stories of really strong girls and a friendship with a boy and a girl, you know, that they're all friends together. It's not all the boys here and all the girls here. And then just seeing damn good theater and having them be like, that was great. Can we watch it again? Oh my gosh. I sneakily play them the songs I recorded from rehearsal, and they're like, yeah, you know. So it's all of it is really, really impactful and kind of the reason to do it. You know?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I mean, my son is he's very curious about my experience in the military, but also my father's and his other grandfather. I come from 3 generations who have served in the military, and not in terms of like the story where it's like, oh, let's go fight for the country, but it was more of out of a necessity in terms of survival, in terms of, you know, being able to pay the bills and have a job. And I mean, for me, I went because I needed, that was the only way I was going to get college paid for. At the time, that's all I figured. That was my own solution. And my son's been very curious about that. So, I mean, I continue to think about a way in terms of how, I mean, I feel like this is something more in the future, like being able to write a piece that really, to kind of not just share my experience, but share in terms of like what his grandfathers went, but then also hopefully something that connects to every kid who grows up with a parent in the military. Because I mean, my son loves to hear my own stories in terms of, and thankfully, like for me, like I served in a time where there wasn't any conflict going on. But still, I mean, it was still a very scary experience in terms of training, and so I feel like that's one of the story that I continue to figure out, like how can I tell them? Because I mean, yeah, I think when I knew when I was writing Luchador, I knew that I wanted to kind of share aspects of our culture and his family, that things that he might not have seen prior to that, but definitely got to see in terms of, you know, even, I mean, my father doesn't talk about his work of being a migrant worker. He doesn't tell those stories unless you really, really ask him. But I mean, I felt like that's something that should be acknowledged. Like, I mean, I've met so many family members, you know, my own family, but even friends who, like, that was definitely a part of their life, but they don't talk about it. And it's not, and I don't know if it's out of shame or what, but definitely, I mean, that was a backbone of this. I mean, migrant workers are the backbone of this country, you know, in terms of, especially in terms of, you know, when my father was growing up, and so I felt like we've got to celebrate these workers, you know, and I wanted my son to like be proud of, you know, like this is what Grandpa did to be able to like pay the bills, and you know, and so I think about that, and I also think about like there are certain books that I kind of awoke to when I was in college that have actually young protagonists that I want to figure out a way to be able to kind of to number one introduce to my son. Well, his son's a big reader, so I feel like he's going to read them anyway. But I want to be able to see if there's a way that I can be able to present them on stage, And like, I mean, and what's funny is like the one that I really wanted to do already, there's already a version of it, but I feel like, you know, I feel like I need a little more time, and I would love to do it. Is one of my favorite books is called Bless Me Ultima by Rodolfo Naya. And there's something, this relationship between this boy and his grandmother reminds me so much of my own grandmother, and who is somebody who my son never got to meet. So, and so I think about that, like that's in terms of like, there are certain stories that in terms of like Chicano Latino literature that has really impacted me, that I would love to be able to kind of figure out a way to kind of introduce to my son in you know, using theater, and in hopes that, I mean, not just him, but you know, maybe even other Latino kids might say, hey, you know what, I want to pick that book up. You know, I'm curious about that.
I mean, it's striking me what you said earlier, Alvaro, about that it's all family theater. It all should be, you know, and so much of the reason to write anything is because it was so powerful to you. Yeah. And it's a story that you feel is not just your own, but it makes you want to learn more about the world, makes you want to care more, makes you want to understand more. And I think certainly for TYA, I feel like there's no use writing a TYA show or a show for families that includes them that isn't like, let me show you something of the world. Let me make you feel a thing and tell you it's okay to feel it. Let me, you know, it more than any other theater, really, it's about how do we make the world better through theater, because these are young people and they've got lives and we can change them and we can affect them at such a young age. It's a profound responsibility, but it's like such a giddy, hopeful one, you know?
Yeah,
so I love writing TYA because I'm like,
exactly. I mean, it's funny. Like, I mean, I used one of the reasons why I took on writing Mariposa, which is my last piece, On the Wings of Mariposa, was actually it was for me and for my son and for my family in a way that, so I didn't grow up celebrating Dia de los Muertos, you know, but I felt like this was a great way to be able for me to learn about it and for also my son to learn about it. Right. And that we can then now start, you know, there's a way to be able to connect to it and be able to kind of just be able to see the real aspect. And because, I mean, it's set in Mexico, so it's not this kind of Americanized version. So you get to see it as what it really is, than the versions that we've seen in mainstream TV. And how it definitely is, how, especially in terms of being Mexican, how being connected to death being part of our culture. And that, I mean, think about it. Like you write a TYA play about get down to it. It's a play about a dead grandmother. You know, how do I sell that as a TYA play? You know, who's going to want to go see that?
You know, it to me. I'm your audience there.
Who's going to want to see that? You know, but yet, you got to figure your way in. And for me, it was tapping into that was this little girl who taps into the smells of her grandmother's, her scarf, her rebozo, and telling that and reliving those memories that she had with her grandmother. And I was like, that's my way in.
Yeah.
And because smell, I think I want to believe for every one of us, smell is definitely a big thing in terms of how it connects us to memory. And I think about, you know, how even just walking into my grandmother's house, or if I knew my grandmother had been in a room, you know, if I just walked in and like, I could just, grandma was here today, right? Because there was that smell. So it's the same, and I felt like I'm tapping into that. And so, and I take on certain things too, just so I can, number one, so I can grow myself, but also like, as a way that I can really connect with my own son and my wife. And it's a way we can connect as a family and connect certain things that maybe we hadn't connected to earlier, but I mean, as a way to like, hey, let's explore this.
Yeah, that's tremendous. And I thank you both so much for this conversation. It's really, really, really great to just hear you all just talk and think and express. And we have very limited time. So before we go though, we got to do a quick lightning round. I have 3 lightning round questions for you. Don't think too much about them.
Horrible.
I know, that's why we're doing it. You got it. I'll save the hardest one for last. I would say the most exciting living American writer is
Luis Alberto Urrea.
made me drop my pen. Lauren Gunderson, same question. The most exciting living American writer is?
It is a young man from Chicago named Terry Guest. You have to look up his plays. He's incredible.
Great. The most important skill to write a play in 2020 is?
Vulnerability. Period.
Oh my gosh. You stumped me, Idris. Oh man, I am blanking. Gosh, I feel. I mean, I love Lauren's answer because I feel like that's a lot of it right there. Is vulnerability. I feel like that's why I do what I do. It's you know yeah.
All right.
I'm sorry.
No. Listen, it is what it is. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Last question.
Oh no.
As a writer, and I want you to answer this question. I want you to say the full sentence that I said to you for this final answer. As a writer, what I hope to provide is?
The challenge to know yourself and others in order to be a better citizen.
As a writer, what I hope to do is create more stories that my son will be proud to pass on to his children.
Oh, that's so good.
Lovely. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Can I tell you, I'm going to tell you this real quick. You two are the most exciting living American writers.
Oh man, you too. This is one reason why I did this. I was like, I get to do this with Idris and Lauren.
No, man, same. I thought the same about y'all too. All right. Super friends forever.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's go. Well, this was a pleasure, gang. Seriously, tremendously. And I thank you.
Likewise.
And, you know, keep on pushing. We'll see you next time.
All right.
I'm going to reach out to both of y'all separately about stuff too. So
all right.
I'll be talking to you again like tomorrow. All right. Peace.
Let's do this again. All right. Bye, everybody.
All right.
Sure.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Wow. That was amazing. That was just so much fun. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I couldn't get enough just listening to them think and talk, and it was very joyful and really thoughtful. I'm so grateful to our panelists and to the National Endowment for the Arts for a really wonderful, heartwarming session. We will be sharing the recording with all of you over email in the coming days. I would also like to thank our fabulous sign language interpreter, Christina Martinez. Thank you. I've been watching your expressions and your sign language throughout, and you've been great. Thank you. Please stay tuned as we will announce more convening opportunities and more programming for the fall and winter in the coming weeks. In closing, I would like to share TCG's brand new mission statement. We've just concluded a strategic planning process, and here is our new mission statement: to lead for a just and thriving theater ecology. How wonderful is that? If you would like to support this mission and TCG's work, please go to tcg.org to donate. Thank you all for your time this afternoon, and thank you for joining us. It's been a really wonderful, wonderful session together. Thank you, and be well.